somewhere beneath the ruins of ancient Alexandria, beneath the limestone corridors of the Egyptian temples, beneath the marble floors of the Greek academies, there were rooms that most people were never allowed to enter, not because they weren't worthy, not because they weren't intelligent enough, but because what was kept inside those rooms was considered too dangerous, too liberating, too powerful for the masses to possess. These rooms contained a different kind of knowledge, not the knowledge taught to the public, not the myths, the rituals, the elaborate public ceremonies. Something else entirely, something that, if widely known, would change the way every human being on earth understood themselves. This knowledge had a name. It was called the Mysteries, and for thousands of years it was protected by some of the most powerful institutions the world has ever known. Tonight, we open the door. In the next 40 minutes, we are going to travel back through time. We are going to walk the halls of the ancient mystery schools, the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece, the Egyptian temples of Karnak and Luxor, the Pythagorean brotherhoods, the Hermetic orders that shaped the very foundations of Western civilization. We are going to discover what the initiates were actually taught, not the surface version, not the watered-down public version, the real thing. We are going to look at why this knowledge was hidden from the public, and what happened to those who tried to share it. We are going to examine what all of these schools had in common, across different cultures, different centuries, different continents, and we are going to ask the most important question of all. What does this hidden knowledge mean for you right now, today? Because the secret of the mystery schools was never meant to stay secret forever. It was always meant to find its way to the right person at the right moment. Perhaps that moment is now. To understand the mystery schools, you first need to understand the world they existed in. In the ancient world, religion was public, elaborate, theatrical, political. There were gods and goddesses, temples and priests, festivals and sacrifices, grand ceremonies performed before thousands of people. This was the esoteric layer of spirituality, the outer form, visible to all, designed to maintain social order and collective identity. But beneath this public layer, in virtually every major civilization that has ever existed, there was something else. A private initiatic tradition, accessible only to those who had been chosen, tested, and deemed worthy. These were the mystery schools. The word mystery itself comes from the ancient Greek word myein, meaning to close the eyes, or to close the lips. To be an initiate of the mysteries meant to have seen something that could not be spoken of, not because it was shameful, but because it could not be adequately expressed in ordinary language, because it had to be experienced, not merely described. The most famous of these schools in the Western world were the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece, practiced for nearly 2,000 years near the city of Athens. Every year, thousands of initiates made the sacred journey to Eleusis, among them Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Marcus Aurelius, the greatest minds of the ancient world. Walking the same sacred road, seeking the same hidden knowledge, they fasted, they drank a ritual preparation called kykion. They entered the telesterion, the hall of initiation, and what happened inside that hall was never recorded. For 2,000 years, not a single initiate broke the oath of silence. Think about that for a moment. 2,000 years, thousands upon thousands of initiates, and not one word leaked out. What could possibly inspire that level of loyalty? What could someone experience that would render them permanently, voluntarily silent? The answer, as we will see, is something that modern science is only beginning to understand. Before Greece, before Rome, before the great philosophical traditions of the Western world, there was Egypt. The mystery schools of ancient Egypt are the oldest known initiatic tradition on earth, stretching back, according to some scholars, over 10,000 years, 10,000 years of unbroken transmission of the most profound knowledge humanity has ever possessed. The Greek philosopher Thales, considered the father of Western philosophy, was an initiate of the Egyptian mysteries. Pythagoras, the man whose name you learned in mathematics class, spent 22 years studying in Egyptian temples before he ever taught a single student. 22 years, not weeks, not months, 22 years of immersion in the deepest knowledge the ancient world possessed. Plato himself studied in Egypt. His dialogues, the Timaeus, the Phaedrus, the Republic, are saturated, absolutely saturated, with Egyptian metaphysics. So what were the Egyptians actually teaching? At the heart of the Egyptian mysteries was a single radical idea. The human being is not what it appears to be. What you see in the mirror, the physical body, the personality, the name, is only the outermost shell of something vastly more complex. The Egyptians described this inner complexity through their concept of the multiple bodies of the human being. The cat, the physical body. The car, the etheric double. The energy body that animates the physical. The bar, the soul. The aspect of the self that can travel beyond the body. The ak, the immortal divine self. The part of you that existed before birth and will continue long after death. And at the deepest level, the sahu, the spiritual body, the fully realized self, the aspect of the human being that is identical with the divine. The entire Egyptian mystery tradition was oriented toward one single goal: helping the initiate realize the sahu, to discover through direct experience that at the very core of their being, they were not mortal, they were divine. This was not metaphor. This was not poetry. This was not a comforting story told to ease the fear of death. This was the central claim of the most sophisticated spiritual tradition in human history. And it was a claim that every subsequent mystery school, Greek, Roman, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, inherited and preserved. When Greek civilization rose to prominence, it inherited the Egyptian tradition and transformed it. The Greeks were masters of philosophy, of rational inquiry, of dialectic. But the mystery schools they created were not philosophical in the ordinary sense. They were experiential. The Eleusinian mysteries, dedicated to the goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone, were built around a single mythological story. Persephone, the daughter of the goddess of life, is taken to the underworld. Her mother mourns. The earth goes dark, nothing grows, and then Persephone returns. Life renews. The earth blooms again. On the surface, this seems like a simple nature myth. The cycle of the seasons, the death and rebirth of crops. But the initiates of Eleusis understood it as something far more profound. They understood it as a map of the human soul. The descent into the underworld was the death of the small self. the ego, the personality, the identity built from memory and social role, and the return was the rebirth of the true self, the divine spark, the eternal consciousness, beneath the surface of ordinary experience. The initiation at Eleusis was designed to give the initiate a direct, overwhelming experience of this death and rebirth, not symbolic, not philosophical, actual. Cicero wrote that after his initiation at Eleusis, he learned not only how to live with joy, but how to die with hope. Plato wrote that the uninitiated, when they die, will lie in the mud, but the initiated will dwell with the gods. These were not casual statements from casual men. These were the most brilliant minds of the ancient world, describing the most important experience of their lives. Something happened in that hall, something that changed them permanently, something that modern scholarship increasingly suspects involved a direct encounter with the deeper nature of consciousness itself. Of all the traditions that emerged from the ancient mystery schools, perhaps none has had a greater influence on the modern world than the Hermetic tradition. Hermeticism takes its name from Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice greatest, a legendary figure who ancient sources described as the greatest philosopher, the greatest priest, and the greatest king who ever lived. The texts attributed to Hermes, collectively known as the Corpus Hermeticum, were written down in the first few centuries of the Common Era, but they describe themselves as preserving a tradition far older, a wisdom tradition stretching back to the earliest days of Egyptian civilization. At the heart of the Hermetic teaching is a principle that has echoed through every wisdom tradition that followed it. As above, so below. As within, so without. As the universe, so the soul. This principle, the principle of correspondence, is not a metaphor. It is a description of the actual structure of reality. The Hermetic teachers taught that the universe is organized according to a set of fundamental principles, laws that operate at every level of existence. From the movement of galaxies, to the firing of neurons, to the arising of a single thought. And they taught that the human being is a microcosm, a miniature universe, containing within itself the same structure, the same laws, the same principles as the cosmos as a whole. To know yourself, they said, is to know the universe. To understand what you are is to understand what everything is. This is why the inscription above the temple at Delphi read, "Know thyself," not as a platitude, not as a piece of self-help advice, as the central instruction of an entire civilization's highest wisdom. Know what you truly are, and everything else will follow. The Hermetic texts were rediscovered in Europe during the Renaissance, and their impact was immediate and explosive. They shaped the development of alchemy, astrology, Kabbalah, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, and countless other traditions. They influenced Giordano Bruno, who was burned at the stake for teaching Hermetic ideas. They influenced Isaac Newton, who spent more time studying Hermetic alchemy than he did physics. They influenced the founding fathers of the United States, many of whom were Freemasons, deeply steeped in Hermetic philosophy. The secret of the mystery schools did not die with the ancient world. It went underground, and it has been shaping human civilization ever since. So why was this knowledge hidden? Why wasn't it simply taught openly in every school, in every culture? There are two answers to this question, and both are true. The first answer is practical. The mystery schools taught that this knowledge could only be received by someone who had been adequately prepared, not because ordinary people were unworthy, but because the experience of direct contact with the deeper nature of consciousness, if encountered without preparation, could be destabilizing, could dissolve the sense of self before a new, stronger foundation had been built. The initiatic process, the months or years of purification, practice, and study that preceded the actual initiation, was designed to prepare the psyche for what was coming. The knowledge was hidden, not to protect it from people, but to protect people from receiving it before they were ready. The second answer is more uncomfortable. As civilization developed, as power structures solidified, as institutions formed to control the flow of information, the mystery schools became a threat. A human being who had directly experienced their own divine nature could not be fully controlled by fear, could not be made to feel permanently small, permanently unworthy, permanently dependent on an external authority for their connection to the sacred. And so the schools were suppressed. The Eleusinian mysteries were shut down in 396 AD by order of the Roman Emperor Theodosius, the Library of Alexandria, which housed some of the greatest repositories of esoteric knowledge in the ancient world, was destroyed. The Gnostic schools were declared heretical and their texts burned. The Cathar communities of southern France, who preserved a form of Initiatic Christianity, were massacred in the Albigensian Crusade. Again and again, across history, the same pattern repeats. The knowledge survives. The knowledge is suppressed. The knowledge survives again because it cannot ultimately be destroyed, because it lives not in books or buildings, but in the structure of consciousness itself, and consciousness cannot be burned. Before we close, I want to leave you with the practice. At the heart of the Gnostic path, it is called recognition, not meditation in the conventional sense, not a technique or a method, a direct seeing right now in this moment. Notice that you are aware, not that you are thinking about being aware, not that you are trying to become aware. You already are. This awareness, this simple, undeniable presence, is not a product of your brain or your body. It was not created by any institution or suppressed by any empire. It comes from beyond the structures of this world. It is the divine spark, and it has been here all along. Every time you notice this, every time you recognize the awareness that is looking, rather than getting lost in what is being looked at, you are doing what the Gnostics called gnosis. Direct knowledge, not belief, not faith. Seeing. Do this as often as you remember, in the middle of ordinary life, at the grocery store, in a conversation, waiting for a traffic light. Just notice. Awareness is here, and in that noticing, something ancient in you begins to remember itself. Subscribe, because what we are uncovering here goes deeper with every video. The texts, the secrets, the practices, all of it together. Until then, look inward, see the spark, and remember what you are.